Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Tonight we start with India's role in the Russia-Ukraine war. Could India be supplying weapons to Ukraine? It's stunning, improbable, but not impossible. Apparently, Germany is trying to make this happen. We'll bring you the full report. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president is seeking help from the Saudi crown prince. He went to Riyadh and met MBS. We'll tell you why. In India, the China challenge is proving hard to solve. Why do some government departments want to slash taxes on Chinese imports? We'll explain. In the Pacific, it's Washington versus Beijing over Kiribati. What is Chinese police doing on this island? And why America is failing to reclaim its turf. Why Democrats want Michelle Obama to replace Joe Biden. Would she enter the presidential race? Why flying has become a pain in India and why it's going to get worse. Why Nigeria is battling with record inflation and how the president's reforms have backfired. Why bunkers have become the new status symbol for billionaires. Why South Korea faces what it calls a national extinction and how billions of dollars of government aid is making little difference. Also, what is Vantara? A new animal rescue and rehab center that is making headlines in India. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In India, political crisis erupts in Himachal Pradesh. Is the Congress government on the verge of collapse? The Chief Minister says he's not resigned. But the BJP claims the ruling Congress has lost the people's mandate. On Tuesday, the BJP won the only Rajya Sabha seat in this state. Armenia and Azerbaijan to make a new push for peace. Foreign ministers of both countries to meet in Berlin to resolve the decades-long conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia and Azerbaijan have already fought 2 wars over it. Transnistria, the breakaway Moldovan region, asks Russia for quote-unquote protection. The pro-Russian separatists seek Moscow's help. As pressure mounts from Moldova, there are fears that Russia could annex the region, which is near Ukraine. UN peacekeepers begin their withdrawal from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Kinshasa had demanded the pullout. The government claimed the UN force was ineffective in the war-torn east. The UN peacekeepers had arrived in the Central African country in 1999. More than 30,000 demonstrators take to the streets across Greece to mark the anniversary of the deadliest train crash in the country's history. The protesters demand justice for the 57 people killed in last year's train tragedy. Prince Harry loses his case against the UK government over security. His security was downgraded since he is no longer a working royal. Harry had challenged this decision in court. And Reliance Industries and Walt Disney enter into a joint venture for their entertainment brands. It will combine the businesses of Viacom 18 and Star India. Neeta Ambani will be the chairperson of the $8.5 billion JV. The Russia-Ukraine war has entered its 3rd year. What has been India's role in this war? Supplying humanitarian aid to Ukraine, refusing to join Western sanctions against Russia, and impressing upon all sides that this is not an era of war. This largely sums up India's role and position. But this may change if Germany has its way. They're hoping to buy Indian ammunition to arm Ukraine. It's a stunning claim made by a German newspaper. It says Berlin and New Delhi have started secret talks and that Germany wants to buy Indian ammo. Both sides are being discreet about this. We don't know how serious these conversations are and if they'll lead to a deal. But we do know that Europe is desperate. Ukraine is running out of firepower. America's military aid package is stuck and Europe is struggling to fill the gaps.
We have to commit ourselves to do and provide whatever it takes. We should not say for how long as it takes, but whatever it takes.
That was Europe's top diplomat. He traveled to Kyiv this month and promised to do, quote-unquote, whatever it takes, even if it means tapping India for supplies. It sounds like a far-fetched idea. India hasn't picked any side in this war in Ukraine. It has close ties with Russia, military and strategic ties, historical ties, and India is keen to protect this relationship. But Germany needs the ammo. and it's apparently willing to go the extra mile to explore every possible avenue. Reports say every 2 weeks, Germany's top officials meet in Berlin. They gather to discuss just one thing: Ukraine's military supplies and which countries can be approached to buy ammunition stocks. This meeting is attended by key decision makers, military officers and diplomats and civil servants. They go through their options and explore the possibilities. So what is their plan for India? Reports say Berlin is willing to use intermediaries to buy the ammo through a middleman so that the Indian government won't have any exposure. At this point, it's mostly speculation, but Russia will be watching all of this carefully because last month, Moscow had raised a concern with New Delhi. It had found Indian shells in Ukraine. That's right. And what kind of shells were these? 155mm artillery shells commonly used in howitzers. How did these shells end up in Ukraine? One report said they were originally bought by Slovenia. They did not share who the shells were for, but once they were delivered, Slovenia just shipped them to Ukraine, apparently without keeping New Delhi in the loop. And this could happen again. So India will weigh its options carefully. Of course, Europe is not the only party scavenging for ammo. Russia too is on the lookout, and it's said to be tapping North Korea. Last year, there was an exchange. North Korea made a special delivery to Russia. It sent 6,700 containers. It's hard to say what was inside them, but South Korea was watching these consignments and they've gathered some intelligence and tried to make an educated guess. They say the containers could have had 3 million artillery shells, 5,000 rounds of ammo, or a mix of both. And South Korea says this was a barter deal. So what did Pyongyang get in return? They got essential supplies, things like food, raw materials, and manufacturing parts. Since the beginning of this war, Pyongyang has been a reliable supplier for Moscow. Since September last year, North Korea has dispatched more than 10,000 containers to Russia. These containers had just two things: munitions or munitions-related supplies. So both Ukraine and Russia seem to be chasing the same goals. They want more firepower to keep the fight on, even though this could be the best time to discuss a ceasefire. And that's what a war can do: snap existing partnerships and build new ones. President Zelensky is doing just that. He visited Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. He held talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, the choice of destination is key because Riyadh is neutral turf. It doesn't support Ukraine or Russia. On one side, MBS cooperates with Putin to keep oil prices up. On the other side, he backs UN resolutions against Russia. So MBS is keeping his options open. He isn't by any stretch an ally of Kyiv. So why did Zelensky travel to Saudi Arabia? Here's the Ukrainian statement. It says President Zelensky noted in particular Saudi Arabia's strivings to help in restoring a just peace in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia's leadership can help find a just solution. So that's what Kyiv wants. It wants Saudi Arabia's middleman powers. And they're quite good at it. In September 2022, Russia and Ukraine exchanged prisoners. The deal was a complete surprise. No one had expected either side to agree, but Riyadh got it done. Saudi officials said MBS played a key role in the talks then. He got Moscow and Kyiv to exchange 300 prisoners. Around 10 of them were foreign nationals. So Saudi Arabia has a track record of doing some good middleman work. Maybe Zelensky wants a repeat of that. He recently called for the release of captured Ukrainians. It could offer him a domestic political boost.
Today, no one can say for sure how many of our citizens, children and adults, warriors and civilians, are being held in Russian captivity, in Russian deportation, in camps, and how many of our people are in the prisons of this terrorist state. But each of us can and must speak with absolute certainty and specificity. We must do our best to bring all these people home to Ukraine.
Even otherwise, he needs MBS in his corner. You see, Ukraine is planning a grand peace summit. It will be hosted by Switzerland later this year. The goal is to discuss Zelensky's peace plan. We've told you about this before. This plan has 10 points. They include Russia withdrawing and giving back territory. Basically a non-starter for Putin. Which is why Zelensky needs more support, not just from the West, but also from neutral partners. Enter Saudi Arabia. It's the biggest economy in West Asia, also the natural leader of the Muslim world. So if MBS supports Kyiv, it will add weight to Zelensky's plan. But will the Crown Prince do that? Here's what the Saudi statement says, and I'm quoting again. MBS affirmed the kingdom's keenness and support for all international endeavors and efforts aimed at resolving the Ukrainian-Russian crisis. Two things to note here. One, he doesn't even call it a war, he's calling it a crisis. And two, he stands ready to help and negotiate. And this sums up Riyadh's policy. Yes, they have pushed for peace, but they have done so without picking sides. MBS needs Putin to keep the oil prices high. Higher oil price equals more revenue equals more futuristic projects and mega cities for Saudi Arabia. So don't expect MBS to abandon Putin. But forget Saudi Arabia for a moment. What does this outreach say about Zelensky? He's on shaky ground. Things are not going well on the battlefield. In the east, Ukrainian troops are being pushed back. They recently abandoned a town called Avdiivka. It was Russia's biggest victory since May 2023. Plus, military aid is stuck. The US Congress has not approved Joe Biden's request. Ukraine is waiting on $60 billion. They're running low on weapons and ammunition. In simple words, Zelensky is getting desperate. He needs to widen his coalition of support. He needs to reach out to neutral partners, maybe offer some concessions. We've seen that desperation in his recent statements. This week, he revealed Ukraine's total battlefield losses for the first time. More than 31,000 soldiers have been killed so far. Zelensky also said losing is not an option.
We have no alternative but to win. There's no possibility to lose, because what if Ukraine loses? We won't exist. Our existence will cease. So we definitely do not want such an ending to the fight for our lives.
So Zelensky needs to rally the world. He needs to remind the world about Ukraine. But it's a tough mission because there's a second war on right now, an arguably deadlier one. Some 25,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza. In Ukraine, that number is 10,000. It's an unfortunate comparison, but that's what it is. Plus, West Asia is a more sensitive region. So the global community is focusing on the second war, which is why Zelensky hopped on a flight. He has a short window here. February 24th was the anniversary of Russia's invasion, the second anniversary. So he's getting some airtime and focus. Zelensky wants to capitalize on that, to use this window to reach out and rally support. After Saudi Arabia, he's now gone to Albania. There he is attending a security summit. But will these visits and statements translate into actual political support? Our experience of 2 years says no. Speaking of tough missions, India too is dealing with one such problem, the problem of China. It's a very tricky situation for New Delhi. On one hand, China is a security threat. On the other, it's a key trading partner. Almost 14% of India's imports come from China, 14%. How do you deal with such a challenge? Well, there seems to be a lack of consensus on that front. Let me take you back to the year 2020. The Galwan clashes had happened in Ladakh. India-China ties hit a new low. So New Delhi tried to reduce its dependence on China. How? One method was tariffs, slapping more taxes on goods from China. That way the imports would eventually reduce. That was the hope. But has it worked? Reports say some government wings do not think so. They do not think this policy has worked. They want New Delhi to reconsider this policy. Maybe try a more nuanced approach. I'll tell you why. A, Indian tariffs are already high. The average was around 13% in 2014. But 10 years later, now, the average is around 18%. Tariffs on imports. Compare that to other developing markets. Vietnam's tariffs are close to 10%. China is 7.5% and Bangladesh is 14%. So Indian tariffs are much higher already. And B, it's affecting Indian businesses. A lot of Chinese goods are not directly consumed in India. They're processed or used as inputs, like circuit boards or chips. Such inputs are used by Indian companies and Indian producers to make final products, like mobile phones or laptops. Now, assume the input becomes more expensive. What happens then? Your production cost will rise, and along with it, the final price of your product will also go up, and that's what's happening right now. Multiple departments have flagged this issue. For example, the Electronics Ministry. They wanted New Delhi to reduce the 20% tariff on certain imports. So the message is clear, ease off on the tariffs. But that's where the problem lies. India's dependence on China is increasing. In 2023, bilateral trade hit a new record, around $136 billion. This trade is stacked in China's favor. The deficit is almost $100 billion. In that context, how can India reduce tariffs? If it does, this deficit could widen. And this is the tricky situation I talked about. You need the tariffs to limit Chinese imports, but those same tariffs are hurting Indian exporters. What does that tell you? It shows you the scale of China's supply chain game. You simply cannot operate without them. I'll give you an example. India has rolled out a scheme to boost local production. The scheme is called PLI, Production Linked Incentives. Now, 12 companies have won contracts under this scheme. 11 of them have Chinese suppliers. Do you see the problem here? Even while diversifying away from China, you cannot escape them. You will inevitably buy Chinese goods. So India has to work around it. Maybe look for alternative sources or invest in new supply chains or look for inputs inside India. Of course, these are all long-term projects. It could take years, if not decades, to complete them. Until then, what we need is clarity. Just take the case of Pakistan. There we have policy clarity. Our policy is crystal clear. Trade, talks and terror cannot go hand in hand. That's what India tells Pakistan. But with China, it seems that clarity is missing. We have seen rising tariffs. We've seen regulatory heat on Chinese companies. But we've also seen record trade. So understandably, there is confusion. And going forward, more questions will be asked because the world is now looking at India to be the global growth engine, to maybe even replace China. But how will that happen if India itself cannot abandon China? Most experts agree that India has arrived. It has a very large and young population. It's not sanctioned like China. It's also a democracy. That puts India in pole position to challenge Beijing. What we need is clarity and patience, I guess. Let's turn to the Pacific now, where the geopolitical chess game continues. This time, China has made a move, and a rather bold one too. China has deployed uniformed police officers to Kiribati. Around 12 of them arrived last year. The plan is to rotate the cops every 6 months. Some quick questions now. Where is Kiribati? It's a tiny island, an island nation rather, in the Pacific. The total population is just 115,000. 115,000 people. Why is China sending police officers there? Because Kiribati is strategically important. Its closest neighbor is the United States of America, specifically the state of Hawaii. Plus, it has one of the largest exclusive economic zones, some 3.5 million square kilometers of it. So simply put, Kiribati is prime real estate in the Pacific, which is why China is making these moves. They signed a security deal back in 2022. It allows China to station police officers in Kiribati. There is no police station yet, but down the line, who knows? Now, Washington has not taken this news well. They're angry and they're lashing out. Listen to the official statement. And I'm quoting, "We do not believe importing security forces from China will help any Pacific island country. Instead, doing so risks fueling regional and international tensions." So what are they doing about it? Nothing, just complaining as of now. You see, the race for Kiribati did not begin yesterday. In 2021, China was eyeing a base there. They decided to upgrade an airstrip from the Second World War. So Washington countered. They promised to rebuild a wharf and open an embassy in Kiribati. It's been more than 2 years now. Neither promise has been fulfilled. And this sums up what's happening in the Pacific. China makes the first move. The US offers a counter. But the politics in Washington drowns it out. We've told you about Joe Biden's massive aid bill. It's worth more than $100 billion. Some of that money is meant for the Pacific Islands, specifically 3 of them, Marshall Islands, Palau, and Micronesia. The U.S. agreed to give them economic assistance. In return, Washington got military access to their ports. A win-win deal. Except the money has not come yet. It is yet to be passed by the U.S. Congress. So these island nations are losing patience. The Marshall Islands president has issued a dire warning. He says relations are being destroyed by the aid delay. She also said it's an opening for China. And you can't really blame her. These countries are not economic powerhouses. They do not have a lot of people, but they do need the money. The rising seas are slowly eating up these islands, so climate financing is the need of the hour for them. It's an existential issue for the Pacific. But what does Washington do? Debate and bicker over domestic politics. Meanwhile, China has no such issues. If Xi Jinping says he will give you money, the money will come. No checks, no balances, no hold-ups. And that's what happened in Kiribati. Until 2019, they recognized the regime in Taiwan, but that year they changed sides. Kiribati decided to switch from Taiwan to China, and the reward was instant. In 2020, China gave aid worth $21 million to Kiribati. For a country of 115,000 people, that is a lot of money. In return, Kiribati signed the security deal. So did another Pacific country, Solomon Islands. They too are hosting Chinese police officers. But what's the end game here? Why is Beijing sending cops to the Pacific? Kiribati says the officers are working with the local police. They're helping with the crime database. But there is a strategic angle here. For starters, it helps with surveillance. These cops can keep tabs on local politics and attitudes, maybe even influence or pressure leaders. Secondly, to control the diaspora. Some 80,000 Chinese live in the Pacific. This is China's way of policing them. And finally, to one-up the US. Police officers represent a Chinese security presence. They may not be soldiers, but they do help China project power. Beijing's ultimate goal is to have a pan-Pacific policing presence. They tried that in 2022, but the Pacific Islands rejected them. The question is, for how much longer? Talk of values and democracy won't keep the Pacific Islands afloat. They need funds, and they need the money now. Now to the US presidential election. We know who the Republicans want, Donald Trump. But on the Democratic side, the choice is even simpler. You have a sitting US president. Joe Biden is the incumbent. He has virtually no challengers. He's breezing through the primaries. In fact, he's just won the Michigan primary. But there is one problem. Joe Biden is 81 years old. He's overseen 2 wars. His approval ratings are at an all-time low. And even though he may not have any competition, it's not like he's popular. Take Michigan, for example. Biden won there, but it wasn't a clean sweep. More than 100,000 people voted uncommitted. 1 lakh people said they were uncommitted, meaning they're not too sure about Biden. But do you know who they're sure about? Michelle Obama. The former First Lady of the United States. The Democrats apparently love her, and a latest poll proved just that. Democrats were asked about who could replace Biden. 20% chose Michelle Obama, 15% chose Kamala Harris, and 12% believe it should be Hillary Clinton. So the Democrats want a shake-up. But their popular choice is not someone in the system. It's an outsider, in this case, Michelle Obama. The question then is, why does America love her? And can she shake up the Democratic ballot? Michelle Obama has always been popular. She came into the limelight in 2008. That's when her husband, Barack Obama, started campaigning. The couple was loved on the campaign trail. Once Obama became president, the appeal only grew. Their stint in the White House was quite popular, and Michelle wasn't just any other first lady. She did not live in the shadows of her husband. She held her own. Perhaps that appealed to a lot of people. She spearheaded campaigns, advocated for military families, and encouraged healthy eating. People saw her as authentic, and it added to her appeal. Michelle Obama had one of the highest acceptance rates among all US first ladies. In 2017, the Obamas left the White House, and since then, Michelle has come into her own. She wrote a book. She signed a Netflix deal. She hosted a popular podcast. She graced magazine covers, and she spoke at Democratic conventions. In 2020, Gallup named her as the most admired woman. She made it to a list of 100 most influential people. She enjoys a 60% favorability rating, so she ticks all the right boxes. Plus, she's young, at least younger than Trump and Biden, and she's impactful enough to rally the voters. Basically, Americans seem to love Michelle Obama, but do they love her enough to make her president? The answer depends on who you ask. 41% voters want Biden to step down. 20% of them say Michelle should replace him. The Republicans, meanwhile, call this, quote-unquote, pure lunacy. And what about Michelle Obama herself? Is she looking at another 4 years in the White House? It's a question she's been asked many times, and she's had only one answer. She won't do it. In 2023, she told Oprah Winfrey that she would never run for president. But in 2024, she's changed her tune, it seems. On a recent podcast, Michelle Obama said she is worried about the election outcome. Let me quote from what she said. What's going to happen in this next election? I'm terrified about what could possibly happen because our leaders matter. Who we select, who speaks for us, who holds that bully pulpit. It affects us in ways sometimes I think people take for granted. She says she's terrified. Is this a cue? Or is the world reading too much into it? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Our next story is about flying. What do you dread the most about taking a flight? Probably the long lines at the airport, a delayed flight, your luggage being tossed around, or even going missing. Any of these can ruin your journey. Now, what if I told you that there are more problems on the horizon? The aviation industry is facing a new challenge, a shortage of planes. How will this impact you? It could lead to higher airfares for starters, and that would be just the beginning. Our next report tells you about the turbulence ahead.
In recent days, taking a flight out of Mumbai has been a traveller's nightmare. Most flights have been running late. Air India, Indigo and Vistara have recorded an on-time performance of less than 65%. And it may get worse. Airlines in India are short on planes. India's biggest budget carrier is Indigo. Last year, it grounded over 30 planes from its fleet. They had a problem with their engines. How does the airline plan to cover the gap? It has come up with two options. The airline plans to induct 11 planes on lease. Indigo is retaining 14 of its old Airbus planes. In addition to that, it's getting more planes on lease. Two more airlines, Air India and SpiceJet too, are keen on rentals. These airlines are responding to the growing demand. India's aviation traffic is surging. Over 152 million passengers booked a flight. That's 23% more than the year before. And well above the pre-pandemic numbers. Already it has led to a spike in fares. Going by one claim, ticket fares for the summer season are already up by 30%. But pricey tickets don't necessarily mean good service. This month, India's Civil Aviation Ministry came down hard on the airlines. They audited the baggage delivery times. The operations of 7 airlines across 3,600 flights were studied. In many cases, passengers had to wait for close to an hour for their bags to appear on the luggage belt. Angry passengers were often seen complaining at airports. India's Aviation Ministry was forced to step in. It has introduced new rules. Airlines will now have to deliver passenger bags within 10 minutes of the aircraft shutting down its engine, with the last bag hitting the luggage belt no later than 30 minutes after landing. The new directive has gone to 7 Indian airlines. India's aviation sector is experiencing turbulence. 2024 is off to a bumpy start. The year began with severe delays induced by heavy fog, hundreds of flight cancellations. It led to significant penalties for the airlines. The sector is experiencing a stress test. By 2030, 300 million passengers are expected to book a flight ticket. That's double the current number. The message from the passengers is clear. They want better services. For that, airlines will have to expand and up their game. And with the occasional reprimand, India's aviation regulator is trying to ensure that they nudge the sector in the right direction.
Now let's turn our attention to Nigeria, Africa's largest country by population and the continent's second largest economy. That economy, however, is on the brink of a meltdown. Nigeria's inflation is at about 30%, 30, the highest it has been in almost 3 decades. And it's taking a toll. Yesterday, the people took to the streets to show that they'd had enough.
We are suffering. We are suffering for Nigeria. It's not like this before, but we want change for good. Hunger day for Nigeria. Children now, they are hungry. Adults are hungry. Sufferness is too much for Nigeria.
Nigeria is no stranger to inflation. It has seen double-digit inflation continuously for all of the last 8 years. But 30% is no joke. Food inflation is even higher. It's at 35.4%. And that is a hammer blow to ordinary people, especially those who are less well off. There are millions who are suffering in Nigeria.
There is suffering in the land. There is suffering for the worker. No worker can live on 30,000 minimum wage. And over 150 million Nigerians are living below poverty line. Poverty, when you say below it, those are the people that can't get something to eat on daily basis.
So how did the situation get so bad? 2 main reasons. One, the withdrawal of Nigeria's fuel subsidy. It happened the day President Bola Tinubu took office. He announced this in his inaugural address. The fuel subsidy was gone and petrol prices surged from about $1 per gallon to $2.8 a gallon. It may not sound like very much in absolute terms, but imagine if your petrol prices tripled in a day. That would wreak havoc on your budget. And not just for individuals, this applies to businesses as well. Transportation costs skyrocket. All types of transportation, like the moving of food from the farm to the market, or moving goods from the docks to warehouses. These rising costs are passed on to customers, and eventually everything becomes more expensive. So Nigeria's fuel subsidy withdrawal had a domino effect, directly leading to the surging inflation, and the president would have seen this coming. Then why did he withdraw the subsidy? Because of external pressure. The IMF, or International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank both recommended the withdrawal of fuel subsidies. They wanted Nigeria to join the rest of the global free market and level the playing field. Plus, the move was good for Nigeria's government as well. They were spending billions of dollars on the subsidy. It was becoming increasingly unsustainable. So in theory, it was supposed to be a good move. But in practice, it proved to be disastrous. Perhaps because it was done in one fell swoop. The shock of removing the whole subsidy destabilized Nigeria, and now everyone is scrambling to limit the damage, to keep starvation at bay. The government has announced some measures, like stipends for unemployed youth, and a new food stamp system that's being proposed, not to mention the free rice distribution system that is already underway, where people are dying in stampedes as supplies run out. Meanwhile, Nigeria's central bank is raising interest rates. It raised the rate by 4% yesterday to 22.75. This kind of hike has not been seen for 17 years. It highlights the crisis in Nigeria. Now, I mentioned that there were 2 things driving inflation. The first was the fuel subsidy withdrawal. We've talked about that. The second was devaluing the currency, the naira. From 2015, the currency has been pegged to the US dollar. This means the value was kept fixed. Its price was not allowed to change, so its real value was never reflected. This had artificially boosted the currency's value, and it helped Nigeria when it came to imports. They could buy essential goods at reasonable rates. But this currency peg was also undone by President Tinubu. He unpegged the Nigerian currency and then devalued it twice. Theoretically, this was another good move. It should have improved investor confidence, brought in foreign investment, and led to creation of jobs and industries. But again, the move backfired. The naira sank to record lows. This means imports are now far more expensive. Those costs are also passed on to customers, and once again inflation surges. So these were President Tinubu's twin reforms that have wreaked havoc. The intentions may have been good, but the implementation was horrific, and Nigerian people are paying the price, literally. Now, billionaires have many obsessions. Supercars, ice baths, exotic animals, you name it, and billionaires usually have it. But of late, they seem to have a new obsession: bunkers. The top 1% are building bunkers. Mark Zuckerberg is constructing one in Hawaii, and it's worth $270 million, $270 million. It's almost like a status symbol now. But why do the super rich need bunkers? Are they trying to survive a war? Maybe another pandemic? Or an apocalypse? Do they know something that we do not? Our next report tells you.
Blast-resistant doors, equipped with its own food and energy supplies. This is a 5,000 square foot shelter located underground in Hawaii. The price tag of the project is $270 million. If you want to survive an apocalypse, this is the place to be. Who does this belong to? Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The billionaire is building a bunker, and he isn't the only one. Former PayPal CEO Peter Thiel tried to build one in New Zealand. Bill Gates has plenty of underground security areas, apparently one under each of his homes. Of course, these are the higher-end ones, but you could get yourself a basic one for $500,000. It's almost like buying an expensive car. And for billionaires, it's a good way to use some loose change. But where are they building them? Apparently all over the world. But a popular choice seems to be New Zealand. It's attributed to its secluded location, which brings us to the boom in the companies building these survival shelters. Some of them are just basic shelters. They are underground, they have all the essentials, you can survive there for a few weeks. But a handful of them go a step further. Like this one project that includes an island fortress. This is not just a bunker. The entire island is like a fort with an inflammable moat. Basically, if you try to step foot on the island, it will burn down. But you will be perfectly safe inside the underground bunker. Sounds perfect for a zombie apocalypse. But why are the super rich building bunkers? What are they so scared of? In the last 5 years, the world has survived a lot. A global pandemic, 2 wars, climate change. Some of these bunkers have registered nurses, a collection of drugs, decontamination booths, medical supplies. One even has a full-fledged operating table. Basically, you can survive anything in there. It's almost like modern-day Noah's Ark. If you are in the bunker, you are likely to survive almost all catastrophes. But it's not for everyone. It's only for the chosen few. And here, Noah is not making the choice. The world's super rich are making it for themselves. But beneath all these underground bunkers lies a dark truth. It's that death is truly the great equalizer. And the super rich, just like us, fear it too. They cannot buy their way out of it, even with these underground bunkers and fortresses. But that hasn't stopped them from trying.
Breaking a world record is great. Shattering your own record, even better. But not when you're winning a race to the bottom. Unfortunately, that's the case with South Korea. More specifically, its fertility rate. What's that? It's an average of the total number of children born per woman. That's the fertility rate. A country needs a rate of 2.1 births per woman. That's the ideal number. But in South Korea, the number stood at 0.78 in 2022, meaning less than 1 child per woman. It was already the lowest in the world, 0.78. And now it has fallen further. Based on data released today, South Korea's fertility rate stood at a record low of 0.72 last year. That's a decline of nearly 8%. Now, 8% may not sound like much, but it has grave consequences for South Korea. The country faces a population crisis, and it is only deepening. With falling birth rates, its population has shrunk for the 4th consecutive year. The country now faces a national extinction. That's what the government is calling it, a national extinction. Here's why South Korea has a population, South Korea has a population of 51 million people. If low fertility persists, the population will fall to 36 million by 2072. That's a drop of 30%, and it will halve by the end of the century, the year 2100. But the baby bust is troubling. South Korea is not alone, though, in this battle. Japan faces a similar problem. This nation, too, is shattering its own record. New data was released yesterday. It says the number of babies born last year fell. A 5.1% fall from 2022, a decline for the 8th straight year, and a record low for this country, Japan. China has a similar problem. Its population fell for a second consecutive year in 2023. Their birth rate, too, is at a new low. Now, as you can tell, this is a growing trend among many Asian countries. In fact, there is a list of 10 nations. They have the worst fertility rates in the world. Notice the Asian countries here. These are some of Asia's biggest economies, and they're leading the fertility decline. Their populations are aging rapidly, and they don't have enough children. It's a major concern for their governments. Why? Simply put, a bigger population means more people can work, so more goods and services are produced, and the economic growth is higher. But when the population shrinks, the share of workforce gets smaller, and the country has to support the elderly, meaning higher costs for governments. So they're trying to reverse the trend by paying people to have more babies. These nations are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to boost fertility rates. Since 2006, listen to these numbers, since 2006, South Korea has spent more than $270 billion to encourage people to have more children, $270 billion. Last year, Japan pledged $74 billion. That's about 2% of the country's GDP. And how is this money spent? Most of the measures across the region are similar. Payments for new parents, extra nurseries, tax incentives, parental leave, subsidized education. They all do this. But do these measures even work? Not really. Data from the last few decades proves this. These are all expensive measures, but they have little impact because people across the region have bigger problems. The rocketing cost of childcare, soaring cost of housing, lack of jobs, and gender inequality. As a result, the young are refusing to get married. Last year, marriages fell by 5.9% in Japan. The year before, they hit a record low in South Korea and China. Fewer people are getting married and fewer babies are being born. So the population crisis is compounding. Throwing money at the problem has not worked so far, and it will not work in the future. What policymakers fail to understand is this. The baby bust is not just about babies, it's about everything else too. It's about not having a well-paying job, not having a decent home to raise a child, not being able to work and take care of a child. These problems don't seem to be going away anytime soon. So if governments think that they have a population crisis now, they don't know what's coming next. Our next story is about wildlife, specifically wildlife conservation. Animal biodiversity is plummeting the world over. Between 1970 and 2018, wildlife populations fell by almost 70%, 70% fall. It means that animals are dying in record numbers, and the main cause is human activity. Humans are encroaching upon animal habitats. We are competing for space and, unfortunately, putting animals to the sword. By all estimates, this will likely continue. But despite this grim forecast, there is some hope. There are initiatives with a focus on animal welfare, missions to protect endangered biodiversity. In fact, one new project was launched this weekend in India. The Vantage project in the state of Gujarat. It means Star of the Forest. And it seeks to become the foremost animal conservation project in India. Here's our report.
In the Indian state of Gujarat, there is a city called Jamnagar. It is mostly famous for one thing. It is home to the world's largest oil refinery. But now, something new has come up here. A conservation area with a focus on protecting indigenous Indian wildlife. It's called Vantage, meaning Star of the Forest. It's an effort launched by Anant Ambani, a scion of India's Reliance Group of Industries. Reliance also owns the aforementioned world's largest refinery, making it easier for them to set up the wildlife project in Jamnagar. Vantage isn't your typical wildlife sanctuary though. It is focused on rescue and rehabilitation instead of just conservation. Animals from around India and some other parts of the world are brought here for treatment. They are rescued from hunters, poachers, circuses, and other instances of human-animal conflict. Once they are in Vantage, they are treated and have a chance to recuperate in a homely environment.
The team has created a wildlife sanctuary, and each enclosure has its own biodiversity. From the plants to the water body to even the rocks and the logs are from originally where the animals came from. Our focus is that India should not have any wild animals suffering.
Presently, Vantage is home to over 200 rescued elephants. In fact, elephants have been given a special priority in the sanctuary. About 3,000 acres have been devoted to their rehabilitation. This includes a 25,000 square foot hospital for them, and even a special 14,000 square foot kitchen. After all, elephants are massive creatures. They require equally massive helpings of food. But while elephants may have a special place in the project, Vantage also protects all other animals it comes across. Tigers, leopards, bears, even pythons. All these species have been treated in the Vantage facilities. There's a 650-acre site devoted to rehabilitating animals other than elephants. So what happens to these animals after they're recovered? That's where conservation comes in.
We would also like to conserve and breed critically endangered species so we can release them back in their habitat. Because a lot of species, even today as we speak, species are going extinct.
More than 41,000 species are under the threat of extinction, many because of a loss of natural habitat. There has been about a 70% decline in wildlife populations since 1970, and this has not been spread evenly. Europe and North America have seen about a 20% drop in wildlife numbers in that period because they happened to wipe out their biodiversity much earlier, during the early years of the Industrial Revolution. On the other hand, the developing world is now seeing its biodiversity loss. South America was the worst offender, with a 94% loss in biodiversity. Then there was Africa with 66%. And then comes the Asia-Pacific region with 55% biodiversity loss. India falls into that third group. It means the country's wildlife is definitely at risk, unless projects like Vantage are developed to shield it.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Gaza, Jordan's King Abdullah joins crews dropping aid over the Strip. In the United States, smoke engulfs Texas as wildfires intensify across the state, and a doomsday vault in the Arctic gets a record batch of crop seeds this year. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1994, NATO took its first military action. US fighter planes shot down 4 Serbian warplanes. This was in retaliation of violating Bosnia's no-fly zone. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.